So, hello Peter, how are you doing today?
Yeah, good, Jack.
Good to hear. So, as a Charlton fan yourself, Peter, I'm sure you've got many happy memories. Could you share some of them with us, please?
Oh gosh, there are quite a few really. My first game was against Brighton in 1960, so I actually celebrate 60 years this year. As you get older, you forget all the sort of games, but probably one of my favourite years was 68-9, when we were quite close to getting into what is now the Premier League. That was a great side. In those days, the T's and Tracy's, probably well before your time. But that was a really good side. And then obviously, my son was at the club for 14 years, so seeing him play in a Charlton shirt was obviously a bit of a highlight. And then obviously when I went there in '97, got into the Premier League, which we were there for 8 seasons. And that was, we had some, I don't think people realise, perhaps when they look back at some of the old Sky coverage and whatever, what a great side that was. And we had some great, obviously the playoff final itself was an amazing day, amazing scoreline, amazing hat-trick by Clive Mendonca. But, you know, there was some winning at Highbury against the great Arsenal team. Was a fantastic day out. You don't often get to say to the Arsenal hierarchy, you know, sorry about that today, you know, but I'm sure you'll be okay this season. And it was all sort of, you know, there were so many good matches, whatever. And then I think going back with Chris Powell, obviously, you know, I was the person that effectively made the decision to bring Chris in. He didn't have any managerial experience, but I just saw something in Chris that I thought would work, putting that squad together, which was done in breakneck speed. I think 18 out, 23 in, and again that was a great season. So they're probably, you know, in a quick microcosm, the actual, you know, the best times, I suppose.
Loads of very happy memories there. So, obviously, Peter, as most fans know, you've had roles at the club before. Could you outline for some of our younger fans what those roles entailed?
Yeah, I went there in '97, initially as the commercial director, actually. And I'd only been there, I think, a week. And I got promoted to managing director. Richard Murray was the managing director at that time. He decided to, you know, maybe he'd seen enough in a week or whatever, that, you know, he wanted me to take over the whole running of Charlton. I think we made some good decisions in the early days, because the club had floated on AIM, and we were using that to raise money, and then we brought in the players that put us on that fantastic run, which got us to Wembley, and that amazing playoff final. So basically, chief exec through to 2008. I left shortly after Alan. Alan had obviously left in the July. I then went in the following January. Got asked to come back in 2009, almost like as a consultant, because the new CEO, Steve Wagger, hadn't done a loan or debenture before, whereas I had. So obviously I came back and helped out, and that's the famous ex-director's loan that is now referred to, the £7 million loan. So I think I know that one quite well. Went away again, having sorted that out, and then got a call in October 2010. I was actually on holiday in America, and obviously things had deteriorated again. Richard Murray had been left on his own, and I was asked to see if I could find a buyer for the club, because it faced almost certain administration, and managed to do that. That was Tony Jimenez and Michael Slater. A lot is said about Jimenez and Slater, and I probably got, you know, I've got my own issues. But the one thing I would say to you is that he came in at a difficult time, Tony, and he backed the squad being turned around. Whatever the issues fans may have with him, the club then secured promotion with 101 points and went on to finish 9th in the championship before he handed it over to Roland Duchâtelet. So, you know, I think that they're the sort of roles I seem to be sort of the man that always seems to get involved when something goes wrong, really.
So, obviously, as you've just mentioned, Peter, Roland Duchâtelet came after Jimenez and Slater. Just before we move on to Roland du Châtelet, because I've got a few questions there. What do you think went wrong with the Jimenez and Slater ownership?
I don't think we'll ever know the full facts, although some has come out in court cases which have taken place since. But from somebody that was sort of involved, it would appear that the funding of the club unravelled, and the people that had been backing, I'm telling you, were no longer able to do it, and therefore he had to pass the club on to somebody else. But in that period, it was probably a successful period for Charlton. I think 101 points, winning the championship, and then finishing ninth is a good outcome if you're a supporter of the club and you're not really involved in the politics that go on behind the scenes.
Yes, definitely, and I'd say probably my best years at the club were that year of champions, and then followed by the season after, where we performed very well. Many of my favourite players have come from that era, the Powell era. Now, obviously, it's public knowledge that you and Roland du Châtelet have a very strange relationship. Can you talk to us about why this is?
Yeah, quite simple, really. They, obviously, like everybody else, I was concerned to just see the situation unravelling with all the protests and everything else. And as a fan, with a fan's hat on, I couldn't see how you could sustain a club when it was fractured from the board to the fan base, and it needed somebody, I think, to try and improve on that situation. And therefore, I thought, well, all of these protests are going on. Can I do anything? I was in a position to do that with a prospective buyer, and therefore I made contact with Roland. And I think that the reaction I got and the reviews really was unwarranted. I was quite professional in the approach. I was trying to say that if things hadn't worked out for him and it wasn't as he thought it was, that it was a potential buyer, who I think would have been great for Charlton at the time. And I think there were 3 meetings in all that were organised with Catherine Mayer. She cancelled the first 2 at very short notice. And so on the 3rd one, I asked whether or not, I phoned her PA and said, I'm just about to set off for the hotel, is she coming? And she said, no, she's not. So I would have had a completely wasted journey. And that was really how the relationship deteriorated. Roland since said, some things which are outrageous, really, in relation to my time at the club, but no point in wasting time on those. They're not true. And I think that was probably what caused the issue. But at the end of the day, my only interest is in making sure that that we get stability at Charlton. What I'm fed up as a fan is you turn up for a game now, and everybody's talking about the boardroom and not about the team. The whole idea of supporting a football club is you talk about the great goals, the great players, the matches, whatever. You don't go there to talk about people in the boardroom.
Yeah, totally agree with you there, Peter, in terms of actually as a Charlton fan over the last few years, it's been horrible, of course, as you would know as a fan yourself, having to put up with du Châtelet, then Mier, now we've got ESI, and we've not actually really been able to focus on the football on the pitch. I think the biggest relief was actually Lee Bowyer coming along to show us some good football and that not everything was doom and gloom. But I think the main thing is a lot of people, including myself, are very confused about the current ownership situation. What's your understanding of it, and how would it impact your approach at the moment?
Well, first of all, the first thing to say is that you can't really do anything until the EFL make a decision, because you don't actually know who you're dealing with as the owner. I think it's fairly common knowledge amongst Charlton fans that if you take ownership under what I call ESI 1, which is Nima and Southall, that they're under the impression that the club has been acquired by ESI 2, which is Paul Elliott. The reality is that Paul Elliott's not the registered owner of the club. Nima and Southall are still, and therefore the EFL are in a difficult position. Now, I think they've got to the place where they're being asked to approve Paul Elliott, but we still don't know as at today whether that's the case. So if you look at it from Andrew Barkley's point of view, he's still not clear on whether he's negotiating with Neymar and Southall or whether he's negotiating with Paul Elliott until the EFL will make their decision. Not possible to do that. What complicates it even further is obviously in January the ground and the training ground were split away from the club. I think Andrew's been honest from the start and said for a number of reasons he wants to have both the assets, and there's a logic for that. In terms of the training ground, Andrew wants to invest in the academy, but he doesn't want to invest in somebody else's asset. He wants to own the asset. In terms of the stadium, the Valley, it's an integral part of Charlton and being a Charlton fan and what Charlton's about. And you don't really want to be at the beck and call of a landlord. If you can, you want to acquire the ground, not have rental, etc., etc. And that's a situation that needs to be sorted out, because effectively there's two negotiations. There's going to have to be one with either Neymar Southall or another one with Elliott, and then a parallel conversation with Roland Duchâtelet. But of course, the other thing to say about Paul Elliott is he and Chris Varney have gone on the record as saying that if they're approved, effectively they will invest in the squad and whatever. So if they do that, they might not need an Andrew Barkley. They might have plans of their own and funding of their own to do it. So it's a very sort of confused situation, and until the EFL make a decision, it's not really something Andrew can do anything about.
I think that's made the a bit clearer, actually, of what's going on in the boardroom. I think what the key thing with that, especially for fans to think about, is there's always a new piece to the puzzle every single day, so we're really unclear how many pieces that, of course, there are, using that puzzle analogy. But yeah, moving on. I think me as a fan, and I think most fans that I talk to, definitely would like to see yourself returning to the Valley and Barkley taking over and acquiring the club as owner. Now, if Barkley was to do that, what role do you see yourself playing in the club?
To be honest with you, we've sort of we haven't gone into that, because it's a pointless discussion in a way until you know exactly what the structure of it all is. It's very hard when you do due diligence. Part of due diligence is to understand the structure at the club, what's going on, what's good, what's bad, and to come to a conclusion about what you need to do, and to sort of second guess that from afar is not easy. And I've been out of the club now for since 2012, so that's 8 years ago. So I think I know it pretty well, but I don't know the people involved there. I don't know, as I say, what's good and what's bad. I think my role for Andrew would be to make some sort of assessment around all of that and come up with ideas for him to consider. But it's a way down the line, really. The priority is to, if we can help, to help. If the current ownership are approved and they come up with plans that will take the club forward, first of all make it stable and then take it forward, then so be it. Obviously that won't involve Andrew, but we can't do anything until, I know I sound like a record, but there's really nothing we can do until the EFL make their call.
So really, when it comes down to your next steps, it really comes down to the EFL and what their decisions are forthcoming.
Yeah, as I say, you could be on one scenario talking to Neymar and Southall, on another scenario having a discussion with Paul Elliott and Chris Varney.
So I presume then, with so many parties involved, it makes it even more difficult to acquire the club and for everything to move forward. I think I'd be right in saying that.
Effectively, you've got like a sequence of events that need to unfold, and until the first part unravels, it's difficult to know what those conversations are. As I say, it could be that it reverts back to Nima and Southall, and that will doubtless be a different conversation to Elliot and Farnell. But until the club knows exactly where it is, I mean, the concern is that obviously time is moving on. I think the players are back for pre-season training in 10 days' time. Lee Bowyer will want to be putting a squad together for next season. So in the interest of Charlton and what happens next year, it's so important that the decision is taken this week. And then the various parties involved can start to have meaningful conversations.
Now, obviously, you just spoke about a sequence. What do you think would be the first step that would be positive within that sequence?
To be honest with you, Jack, it's very difficult to second guess that, because of the fact you don't know which party you're dealing with. As I say, Elliot and Farnell have gone on the record to say that once they own it, they'll be announcing plans for how they're going to take the club forward, invest in the squad, etc., etc. So you take that at face value. Nima and Southall, I think it's fair to say, would not be investing in the squad. One, because of the dispute between them, and two, because clearly if the funds were available, the funds would have been made known to the EFL long before this. So that's my assumption. But to try and second guess what will happen without actually know who you're dealing with and having the conversations, then it makes it's really crystal ball time, and I'd rather work on facts than sort of hypothesis.
Very well said, Peter. Now, of course, it's a very, very challenging time for the club, and as someone who's been at the club for a long time and seen different things come up and us fight through adversity on so many occasions, could you give us a few words, just to finish off the interview, just a few words of wisdom to potentially give fans some hope?
Well, I don't think that, with all due respect to the issues that have gone on in the past with clubs, I don't think there's ever been this uncertainty surrounding a club of the stature of Charlton. It's what is it now? It's 13 years. This was a Premier League club. For people growing up, they would have seen this as minimum Championship, but majorly, a Premier League club with a Premier League stadium and unbelievable training facilities, which we would make even better. So, this is a big club, and I don't think anybody can, in the senior echelons of the governing bodies of football, can allow a club like this. And I've read all the comparisons with Bury, whatever. I don't think that the authorities can allow this to happen. I also think that it is a fact that there are people in Parliament who are keeping a very close eye on this, and I think if it moved in the wrong direction, I think there'd be a major review of this through the Culture and Sports Committee, and I think the two local MPs have done us proud in terms of putting this on the agenda in the House of Commons, and I don't think they're going to let up. So I think there's enough people out there, whether it's me trying to resolve the funding issue, or whether it's the MPs trying to put this on the agenda. I think there's enough people out there fighting for Charlton. I've also got to say, I probably am not as close to it as you, but the things I have seen, we have such a supportive fan base. And you've seen this all over the years. It doesn't matter whether it was the fans coming together to make the North Stand possible by putting in £1 million and another £500,000 on 5-year season tickets. They've always sort of come to the fore, and the fans are not going to let this club go under because of the current situation. So the strength they show and the intelligence in some of the initiatives that they pursue, I think, demonstrates loud and clear that they're not going to accept a situation where their club's at risk. And I totally understand that. I'm sort of a fan like they are. So I think with all those things batting for us, I would be very hopeful that this will have the right outcome.
Fingers crossed. Hopefully we can keep Charlton from going into very, very dark place, darker than we are now. But as you said at but prior to the interview, Peter, I believe you have a Zoom call coming up in 3 minutes.
3 minutes, yeah.
Yeah, and I just think I want to say, before we wrap up this video, from all Charlton fans, is good luck with everything to come, and hopefully we can all get the best for the club. Thank you very much, Peter.
That's right. Thank you very much indeed.